In Portland, Oregon, outrage tonight as a serial rapist is set to be released. His name is Richard Gilmore, and he admitted to raping 9 victims and was prosecuted for raping a 13-year-old girl. Tonight, we try to figure out why anyone would let him out before serving his full sentence. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, the accused Christmas parade killer in court representing himself for the murder of 6 people, including an 8-year-old boy. Tonight, we are live from the courthouse with the latest.
Have you read or seen the complaint in this matter at any time?
Objection as to relevance.
Grounds.
Overruled. She may answer.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Have you seen or read the complaint?
No, I don't know what complaint is being referred to, no.
And on the docket tonight in Broward County, Florida, closing arguments in the Parkland school massacre case set for tomorrow. What will the defense say? How will they try to convince the jury that this mass murderer's life is worth saving?
We have 37 prior convictions under aggravator 1 here. So we have to spell it out. We don't want a problem in the Florida Supreme Court. We don't want jury questions coming back about how does this work.
Plus, an admitted serial rapist convicted of raping a child about to get out on parole. Tonight's 13th juror question. Under what circumstances do you think a serial rapist should be set free? Get ready. This hour of closing arguments starts right now. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you aboard. If you've been watching me through the years, you know my stance on murder. I do not believe in second chances when it comes to murder. I mean, when people are sentenced to 20 years for taking someone else's life after like planning it and doing it on purpose, I don't understand when that happens. But we see it from time to time. I mean, it's more common there's life without parole, sometimes a death penalty. But there are cases and times where killers, literal killers, are being given a second chance. I personally don't believe in it. I'm a former prosecutor, but I tell you that all the time. There's another scenario, I think, where you could put a couple words together in our system of justice and say, maybe that's someone else who doesn't deserve a second chance. When you put the words serial and rapist together. Serial rapist. Okay, well, let's think about what is this? That's someone who is raping over and over and over and over again. And from covering cases involving sex offenders, one thing has become very clear to me through the years, is that this is one brand of felon that doesn't get better. They get worse. They actually get worse. They are wired differently. They see the world differently. And many of them have admitted having this uncontrollable impulse that drives them to their crimes. Now, let me add one more word to the serial rapist we're talking about tonight, and that is child rapist. 13-year-old girl was the victim that he was convicted of sexually assaulting. 13 years old. And now tonight we sit here and a man named Richard Gilmore. You know, sometimes I don't mention the names of the offenders, like the mass killers, the shooters and the school shooters. Now, this is one you want to know the name because he might be free very, 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 very soon in Portland, Oregon. So let's get some more details on this because I saw the headline today. I went nuts. I want to get specifics. Joining us tonight in Portland, Oregon, criminal justice reporter for the Oregonian, Maxine Bernstein is with us. Maxine, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I want you to, I don't know if I got all the facts straight here. I'm too out of my mind tonight to be thinking straight when it comes to this particular story and situation. So why don't you tell us what exactly is going on with this man, Richard Gilmore? What did he do? And is he actually going to get out? And if so, why and who made that decision?
Sure, thanks for having me. So Richard Gilmore, he's known as the Jaga Rapist, and he had attacked 9 girls and women in the late 70s and 80s in Portland and its suburbs. But he was only convicted of 1 rape, and that was the 1986 rape of a 13-year-old girl named Tiffany Edens in her home in Troutdale, a suburb of Portland. And he was convicted a year later in 1987. And at that time, he was sentenced for rape 1 and burglary 1 and sex abuse, sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and a maximum of 60 years. And under state law at that time, it was up to the state parole board to determine the actual determinate amount of time he would serve. And a year after, the parole board decided to cut his term in half. They felt that a consecutive sentence of for the rape 1 and the burg 1 wasn't appropriate. And every 2 years, he had a parole board hearing in which they determine whether he's able to be supervised in the community and whether he would be a danger. And in 2007, the parole board voted to release him. His victim, Tiffany Edens, immediately, her family, and with the support of the county DA's office, sued the parole board to block his release at that time. That was 2007. And their argument was that the victims hadn't been notified and they deserved to be notified and deserved to speak and challenge his release at the parole hearing. And they won that right, and his release was denied and a new hearing was held. And then every successive 2 years, a hearing was held up until 2016, where the parole board ultimately voted to deny his release. And instead of setting the next parole hearing 2 years later, they voted to defer his release until 2023, which would have been January. That was his release date for 2023, having served 36 years or so. But with good time, his release date was set for December 22nd of this year. And if he were to be released December 22nd, he would be released without any supervision. So the parole board decided to move that up about a week or so. And so his date that he will be released is December 16th to transitional housing in the Portland area.
Now, so if we look at this original sentence, 30 to 60 years, it's really a year after that the state parole board by law had the power to determine a sentence, not a judge, but like a parole board. So if we look at this, the entirety of these circumstances, that would be the first place where this potential sentence was cut to a point where this guy has a chance to get out.
Yes, that's exactly right. At that time, that was the law.
And at this point, they have no choice, but they have to release him at this point because of what was done by the parole board?
His maximum, yeah, under the law, he has served his maximum sentence. He will have served his maximum sentence with good time as of December 22nd of this year. What his victims are very concerned about is that he will be released under classification as a low-level, first level 1, low-level sex offender. And under that classification, only there's no notifications that are required to be made to the community of his release. If he was a highest level sex offender, level 3, the state and county that he's released to would have to alert the neighborhood, the residents, before he moved in. And with every change of address. So that's a big concern of his victims.
So, and you mentioned that they gave him an even earlier date so they could have some level of control over him when he is released. How much control, what's the nature of it, and how long will it last? And I'm really wondering, like, when can he just kind of like disappear into the wind?
So those are all good questions. The state parole board said they would release him to the active supervision of Multnomah County, which is where Portland's located. For the active supervision would last for 3 years. The actual conditions haven't yet been set, but they could include regular check-ins with a parole officer, probation officer. Also, it could include GPS monitoring, and it would include undoubtedly no contact with any of his victims. Now, that active supervision can continue for up to 3 years, but he will remain on some type of supervision with conditions that haven't yet been set until 2034.
Maxine Bernstein from the Oregonian, criminal justice reporter. You have all the facts, all the information, amazing reporting. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, let's bring in our think tank, get some perspective tonight. Joining us in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III is with us. In Stamford, Connecticut, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crosland. And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, family law attorney Jennifer Brandt. Great to see everyone tonight. I mean, you've got to go back in a time machine to really go after the people who are responsible for allowing a serial rapist to be set free. It's that state parole board who made the decision 1 year after incarceration that, oh, let's cut his time in half. Let's cut it in half. Al, I think a condition of his release should be that we should find out where the state parole board members from 1988, where they're living now, and he should live next door to them.
Well, Vin, first I want to say happy Columbus Day to everybody.
Absolutely.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day to everybody. And ironically, it's also the day that Custer was buried up at West Point. Who, by the way, I say ironically because Columbus was his favorite explorer and he was killed by the indigenous people. So it's an interesting scenario there. But going back to the situation with regards to this, it is absurd that he is not a tier 3. A tier 1 makes no sense to me. Tier 3 has very specific protocols for somebody like that, where they basically have to go neighbor door to door and say, guess what? This is me and I'm a sex offender and I'm going to be living next door to you. And it's more than, reporting it just to the police station. Tier 1, it's reporting it to the police station. Tier 3, especially because this man's proclivity for young women, I mean, 17 years of age, 13 years of age, things along those lines.
Those are girls. Let's call, I mean, it's 13 years old, you're a girl.
You're a girl. You're definitely girls. I agree with you on that. But they would, the schools need to be warned about this guy. Okay, there needs to be precautions set up there in the community for this kind of a just horrendous rogue that, I agree with you. He doesn't deserve to be out. Unfortunately, the sentence is what the sentence is, and I would rather him be out with these precautions than on December 22nd, or December 16th, them opening the doors and then he's free to go. And you said about him disappearing in the wind. I wish he would disappear, okay? Because then we really shouldn't have a person like this in society.
Darnell, 36 years locked up. I mean, he's been waiting for this moment. The parole board was trying to do everything they could to set him free. I mean, back in 2007, didn't even want to tell the victims what was going on. Just set him free, set him free. I can't imagine someone who's a serial rapist for 36 years locked up with nothing but other men. The first thing and only thing on his mind when he gets out. I am scared for the people of Portland tonight.
I would agree. And, what comes to mind is it feels like we're living in a banana republic, because the more we look at these bizarre rulings throughout these quote unquote United States, it seems like we're anything but united. And sometimes you say it's a race issue and you show disparities. But more often we're seeing it's not even a race issue. It's just a state issue. Here in Connecticut, we had the Century Park 5 that started in New York. They got that wrong. And those young men were in jail. The victim was a victim who, a young lady from here in Connecticut, Fairfield County. And then you look at the type of registration they had, even in that case. These are lifetime registrations. These are not for law enforcement purposes only. And now you get a case where this guy admitted to raping 9 women. And we're even talking about what type of registration, what type of tiers. It should be automatically that he gets the highest of tiers. He admitted it. And then you find the disparities across the country, and it's alarming. Now, I have to say, as the reporter, she was very, very thorough and very smart, and she connected to a lot of things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. They have something called TS, which is transition supervision. The whole idea with TSing is that even though your sentence might be this long, 6 months, 10 months, a year, they want to TS you a little earlier so that way you can acclimate back into society. And so what that does, it looks like it's a reward that you get out earlier, but it's a reward in one sense, but it has a purpose in another sense, that they can start to show you what a debit card looks like, allow you to take some classes and stuff like that. But it does look like it cuts the sentence down. And just lastly, I would say the quote-unquote correctional facility is another word, as just as well as serial killer or serial rapist, correctional facility. The idea is, are we correcting anyone? And if we're correcting them, then we shouldn't have no problem with them coming back.
You can't correct. No, sex offenders don't get corrected. They're the worst. It's the way they're wired. And I just don't believe that a serial child rapist gets better.
Well, Vinnie, you always attack Al on the idea with the Parkland shooting that he doesn't get a vote. He can't fight against the legislature, capital punishment. You don't get a vote on this, Vinnie. It's what it is. The sentence, it has to end. They can't, unless you're going to change the law and say it should be lifetime.
60 years. It should have ended after 60 years. Then we wouldn't have to worry about it. He'd die in prison. That's what I'm really saying here tonight.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Okay, good. Jennifer Brandt, we use up so much time, but you've got some. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with my panelists tonight. I think this guy should stay in prison. I agree with you, Vinnie. I don't think there's any place for him in society. The only thing I can say is that, look, the good news, if there's any good news, he is getting out early and he will be supervised. If we waited until his sentence was completed, he would just be completely out on the street after finishing up his entire sentence. So I think the supervision is good. At least someone's watching over him. I don't think it gives a lot of comfort to his new neighbors, but nonetheless, hopefully someone will be monitoring what's going on with this.
Yeah, and I think the first, well, it's a bunch of first things he's going to want to do, but I know one thing that's going to be on his checklist is learning how to use high-speed internet. And I wonder what he'll use that for. I wonder. No idea. Huh. All right. Al Wunsch, Darnell, Crosland, Jennifer Brandt staying with us the whole hour. When we come back, we're going to take you live to Wisconsin. Chanley Painter is going to join us. The Christmas parade killer, accused Christmas parade killer, representing himself. Much different look today, much different demeanor. Chanley has the latest.
I just remember being struck by the vehicle from behind, on my back, and then I fell to my knees and kind of rolled under the vehicle, and when after it happened, I guess I didn't really know, I thought that somebody would have stopped after that point, and when I looked up, I just remember the vehicle continued.
One of the surviving victims from the Christmas parade case that we are covering on Court TV. Wow, difficult moments on the stand to relive that day. She survived 60+ people struck that day. 6 lost their lives, including that 8-year-old little boy. I want to bring in Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter, who's joining us live tonight from Waukesha, Wisconsin, where the trial's taking place. How did the day end today?
Well, Vinnie, you're right. It was a tough afternoon inside the courtroom as the survivors of the Waukesha Christmas mayhem took the stand one by one. It culminated with Thomas Green, who attended as a spectator. He was there with his 3 children, and he told this jury about seeing what he thought was a vehicle, a part of the parade at first, but then it plowed through several members, 10 members of the Waukesha South High School marching band, and he recounted that chaos. He watched it unfold, and then he said the vehicle swerved into his family, hitting 2 of his children. Right there, you can see his arms crossed. He was looking directly at the defendant. It was like a stare, intense. You could tell when he entered that courtroom, Vinnie, that this was going to be something to watch. Let's take a listen to part of the cross by the defendant.
You state for the record what you did immediately following the vehicle passing you?
I ran to see if my kids were okay.
Do you recall getting a look at the driver of the vehicle?
Yes, I do.
And what did you see?
I seen somebody in a hoodie with dark skin.
From your opinion, about how fast would you say the vehicle was traveling?
Hard to say.
Thomas Green's body language speaks for itself and how he felt. The jury picked up on that as well. It was a tough day because, again, not only testimony, Vinnie, but video after video of the carnage played.
How about the defendant, the accused, who's chosen to represent himself? What did you notice about him today?
Well, first of all, he showed up in a suit and tie this morning. That was a stark difference from most of last week, where he chose to wear his orange jailhouse jumpsuit. He did tell the court last Friday that he would feel more comfortable wearing a suit after his COVID-19 negative test results were returned. But it wasn't just that today. He had done his homework. He pulled out his law books and made a motion, was successful in having this dash cam video we have stricken from the record. That was again taken up this morning, and the judge put it on the record, instructed the jury that they are not to consider this because at one point Erica Patterson, his ex-girlfriend, talks about a prior act that's not admissible into evidence. But then, Vinnie, he had a contrite apology. Let's watch.
I'm going to stand up as a man and tell the whole court and you, Your Honor, that I apologize to the bailiffs, that I apologize for my actions. Like I said, that's not how I was raised. I come from a Christian background. My mother did not raise me that way. She did not raise me, to act out of frustration and irritation and anger. And I just wanted everybody to know that I apologize for my actions. And I'm going to try my best to, whatever happens, to conduct myself with respect and with respect to the court.
He seemingly did that today, Vinnie. The first day of the entire trial, he stayed inside the actual courtroom, was not sent out in the other courtroom for disruptive behavior.
Now, in that, he spoke about his mother there, and I understand that you spoke to his mother today.
I did speak to his mother at length over the telephone. She's not doing television interviews currently, but said I could report some of the things that she was saying to me. And I asked her, because I called her, Vinnie, because I had a feeling she was responsible for this change of behavior. And she said, yes, give her full credit for lining up her son for the different person we saw in court today. In fact, here's quote what she told me. She said, I really had to tear into him and be real firm with him. I had to bring in some examples from the Bible to bring it home. I had to let him know that we as Christians can't act like that. I'm his mother. I have 40 years. I know how to talk to him, what tone of voice to use, and how to say such things. I can keep him grounded and calm. So she took the credit, but I did ask her reaction to his disruptive behavior last last week, she said he was overwhelmed and not having a good enough understanding to understand courtroom procedures, when to object, what to raise, how to ask questions. I also dug in a little bit more about her thoughts on why. So many people want to know why this incident happened. She said to me, something caused him to have a psychotic break. She points the finger to Erica Patterson, by the way. He was already manic, she said, and that took him over the edge. She talks a lot about this mental illness, saying that he had a prior diagnosis of bipolar intermittent explosive disorder, that the altercation beforehand was that final straw that sent him into a psychotic break. She told me that he doesn't remember even what happened, but she talks to him frequently. She's not watching the trial, Vinnie, and she does feel good now to hear that his behavior changed after she lined him up.
Chanley Painter and Waukesha, thank you so much. Have a good night. We'll speak again as this trial continues right here on Court TV. Let's bring back in our think tank, Al Wunsch, Darnell, Crosland, Jennifer Brandt with us. Darnell, you know what I'm seeing now inside that courtroom? I'm seeing a defendant represent himself just good enough to get convicted and have no viable lack of competency for counsel as an appellate issue. I mean, he's straddling that line just perfectly, that he's not so out of control that it'll be a basis to win an appeal, and not quite good enough to actually win the case.
I see danger ahead. And so what I'm saying is that he is going to continue to have these episodes, if you would, if they're not regulated, because obviously he's had a psychotic break. His mother spoke about this when Court TV covered this in the beginning, and you saw how he behaved in the beginning. So now he's calm, and this is classic. This is a classic example of people who have mental challenges. So I don't think he's doing himself a disservice. I think the judge is happy. I think we all feel happier with him behaving himself. But I don't think it dismisses the fact that he has a classic mental health issue. So what's going to happen is he's going to get convicted. We know that. And then the appellate team is going to come in and file a habeas, or they're going to try to put forth mitigators in terms of sentencing. And everything that they're going to put forward is going to go right back to his issue. So we're glad that we have a calm moment now. His mother did a good job. But even in doing that good job, she keeps bringing up that he's sick, that he's sick, that he's sick. So that's not going to go away. And so that's why I say I hope he maintains, but I see some danger down the line. And I also see a really big challenge with the appellate team. Lastly, I would say what's the father's name? Thomas Green. He did an excellent job keeping his composure, because I give him a lot of credit. I don't know how he can talk to someone who caused this much hurt and keep his calm. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely. Jennifer Brandt, he goes from shirtless last week in court to suit and tie today.
That's right. Well, it was a nice change to see this, Vinny, but I don't think it's going to last very long. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow he's back in his jumpsuit and he's carrying on and throwing signs around and putting them down his pants and all the things that he did last week, and all the craziness. I don't think he lasts in the courtroom for another full day. I think that we're going to see him act up again and just cause a lot of chaos in this trial, which we've seen all along. And I feel sorry for these victims that are coming forward and having to testify and tell their story, especially if he's not going to be able to behave himself. Today he acted appropriately, but I don't see that lasting throughout this trial.
Al, he won an objection. He actually won an objection. He got some evidence suppressed.
Vin, that goes on the point that you raised, with Darnell, that's going to probably screw up his ineffective assistance of counsel claim, because he actually won a motion. He filed the motion and he won the motion. The judge gave it to him. It was gave him a bone on that one. Not a big deal. But you know what? Let's face it. As my good friend Ian Hunter once said, you're never alone with a schizophrenic, and it's going to be downhill from there at some point in time.
And that is your friend? Your actual friend?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. Al Wunsch, Darnell Crosland, Jennifer Brandt staying with us. I'm just making sure. I don't know if with his good friend. He's friends with everybody. This guy knows everybody. All right, when we come back, the Parkland school shooting, massacre. Closing arguments. What on earth is the defense going to say? What is the reason why this jury should spare this mass murderer's life? Live report when we come back.
I am very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day. And that if I were to get a second chance, I will do everything in my power to try to help others. And I am doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day. And it brings me nightmares, and I can't live with myself sometimes. But I try to push through because I know that's what you guys would want me to do. I hate drugs, and I believe this country would do better if everyone would stop smoking marijuana and doing all these drugs and causing racism and violence out in the streets. I'm sorry, and I can't even watch TV anymore. And I'm trying my best to maintain my composure, and I just want you to know I'm really sorry. And I hope you give me a chance to try to help others. If I believe it's your decision to decide where I go and whether I live or die. Not the jury's. I believe it's your decision. I'm sorry.
That was the Parkland school killer. After he pleaded guilty, admitted to all the murders. Now he's at the penalty phase, closing arguments for that penalty phase set for tomorrow. Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae joining us live tonight from downtown Fort Lauderdale. Julie, great to see you. What do we expect from closing arguments tomorrow?
Vinnie, we can expect a full day of arguments. We expect there's going to be about 2 hours from the prosecution, then 2.5 hours from the defense. They get to go last in Florida during a penalty phase, so they'll have the last word in front of this jury. And they're going to be tasked with putting everything together for this jury. The prosecution explaining those aggravators that they say warrant the death penalty, and then the defense arguing that these mitigators put everything into context and implore this jury to show mercy. This case started on July 18th, and this jury's only heard about 27 days worth of testimony over the course of these 3 months. So they really will be tasked with putting everything together for this jury. And it could get contentious, as it has during many moments in this case. And there's one, Judge Elizabeth Scheer said, here is your warning. This is what I want to make sure doesn't happen tomorrow. If so, here's how I'm going to handle it. Take a listen.
I want to say one thing. Throughout this trial, I have made rulings which have not been respected, and things that I have said are not to be asked have been asked anyway. I want to say that after today, if I rule that certain things are not allowed to be mentioned, or if I have previously ruled they're not allowed to be mentioned, and they are mentioned, and this is fair warning, I am going to reprimand either side if you do this in front of the jury. I'm going to say, Ms. Bailey, I have told you not to say that, and I'm going to tell you again, the jury is to disregard that statement. And that is fair warning. I'm using my lovely court reporter as an example because I don't want to be accused of picking on either side. But if either side gets into something that I have said is not admissible, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to assume it's a strategy of yours and you do not care whether or not you get reprimanded.
Her Honor telling these parties that if it happens, especially to the defense, that they need to talk to Nikolas Cruz about that now so that he's prepared for if she has to reprimand them in front of the jury, Vinnie.
Absolutely. Wow. Now, the death penalty in Florida, the verdict forms in these cases and the way these verdicts are delivered are very, to me, very complicated. How about for this case? What do we expect when it comes to the jury having to fill out and sort through the verdict forms?
Yeah, Vinnie, these are already a complicated batch of verdict forms when you're talking about the penalty phase in Florida. Even if there was just one person who was killed by someone, or even 2 or 3, which we've seen multiple cases here on Court TV. This one's going to be particularly lengthy for this jury because there are 17 victims in this case, 17 who were killed, but then there's also the ones who survived this and came into the courtroom to tell their story. That was a battle inside of this courtroom today. We had a charge conference where the attorneys could argue over how this jury is going to be instructed, how the verdict form is going to be read. The defense had an issue with how many times it'll be emphasized that this was 17 counts. So the actions of this defendant, the 17 people that he killed, is the reason that this is going to be even longer, because they are going to have 17 individual verdict forms to fill out. But take a listen to some of those arguments inside of the courtroom today.
And then you have 17 attempted first-degree murders. There really is no shortcut. You have 34 contemporaneous convictions, and then you have 3 priors regarding Beltran. I mean, we have 37. We have 37 prior convictions under aggravator 1 here. So we have to spell it out. We don't want a problem in the Florida Supreme Court. We don't want jury questions coming back about how does this work, because historically this is where the jury could get confused unless they are explicitly instructed.
If you caught it there, part of the confusion is not only that there's 17 different verdict forms, but when they're being instructed, they have to understand that under each of those 17 victims, their individual verdict forms, they will also be told that one of the aggravators is that this defendant has already committed other crimes. That includes the ones that happened on the day of the Parkland school shooting. So the 17 names of the other victims and the 17 who survived, plus the officer that he assaulted earlier that he already pleaded guilty to, all of that goes under every single one of those 17 verdict forms when it comes to the prosecution's case for aggravation.
And how about mitigating factors? What do we expect to hear?
We expect that the defense is going to focus on his drug exposure when he was a child, talk about the diagnosis that he was given by certain people, but also his family. Under Florida law, there's this catch-all mitigator where they can put up really any mitigating factor that they think is relevant. The prosecution has to stick to the statute. There's only a few they can pull from. But there's one that today the state said it goes beyond even what the statute allows the defense to talk about. Take a listen.
Nikolas Cruz's birth mother died very shortly after her birth. And
died? Nikolas Cruz's birth mother died very shortly after he met her.
After he met her. And the state would object to that based upon the case of Beasley versus State 774 Southern 2nd 649 Florida 2000, which states, Your Honor, that a death of a family member that occurred after a homicide is not mitigating.
Mitigating factors, the judge said it shouldn't be that it would be something after the homicide, but there was one situation where if someone acts a certain way while they're incarcerated, something good that the defense could bring up, then that could be a mitigating factor that happens after the homicides. But in this case, the judge is going to look up the case law. It sounds like the state says they can't talk about his mother who died last year, his birth mother, Brenda Woodard.
Julie Janae down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Big day tomorrow. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in the think tank really quickly. Al Wunsch, Darnell, Crosland, Jennifer Brandt with us. Only have time to go around the horn. Give me a number 0 to 10 on the likelihood of this jury saying and recommending the death penalty, 10 being death, 0 being life. Al.
10.
Jennifer Brandt.
It's Florida.
10.
Darnell.
10.
All right, we shall see. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, time to hear from you, our 13th juror. Don't go away. There is Richard Gilmore. That's a 2008 picture from a parole board hearing. The parole board cut his sentence in half. He's a serial rapist, admitted serial rapist who was convicted of raping a 13-year-old girl. He will be free in December. So I posted this on social media, number one, so the folks in Portland, Oregon know. And number two, to ask you a question about it. Under what circumstances should a serial rapist be set free without doing the maximum amount of time? Our 13th juror comment of the day comes from Rich, who says, I don't think he should serve any time at all. He should be released to the custody of the victim's father. Al Wunsch, Darnell, Crosland, Jennifer Brandt back with us. Jennifer Brandt, what do you think of that?
I think that sounds like a pretty good idea. I think maybe that would be his ultimate punishment.
Jared tonight. Oh, go ahead. You can.
No, I just think that's a creative solution to this problem.
Absolutely. Jared tonight. No, he should serve life because he will hurt someone again. Al Wunsch, do you agree with me that they don't get worse, they get better, sex offenders?
They don't get better, they only get worse, and then it's a horrendous situation. He has to be supervised for life. He cannot be supervised for 3 years. It would have to be life at a minimum, and, God help him if he did something again.
Stacy tonight, if we are to be a lawful society, as much as we detest this and other individuals, we have to also understand their release must happen. Darnell, must all non-murderers be released, or are there other crimes short of murder that could deserve or should deserve a long life sentence where the convicted person dies behind bars?
Yeah, Stacy, she must have knew this question was coming to me because she knows I'm a law and order guy. And so, yes, if we're going to be a lawful society, we must release the man in accordance with the statutes that are in place. I have no issue with us legislating different laws. But as it is right now, we can, bellyache all we want about this. But the parole board, again, in Oregon, different than maybe New York or Connecticut or New Jersey, they see it the way they see it. And so I think that if it affects all of us in the United States, we should be heading over to Oregon and helping them see the light of day, because they're doing the wrong thing here. This was an evil man, did evil things, and the law as it stands allows him to be able to get released. So we need to change the law.
Yeah, I wonder if it was New York, he'd be released without bail. Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. Tammy tonight, unless he agrees to being castrated, then possibly after serving his full sentence, other than that condition, no parole. Yeah, I'm going to have to leave it there. We'll give Tammy the last word on that. Big thank you tonight. Al Wunsch, of course, Darnell Crosland, Jennifer Brandt. Great to see you on this Monday night. We'll see you again really, really soon.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back, the work's not done here. It is not over. We have a child in potential danger tonight that needs your help. We've got that story when we return. Don't go anywhere.